This is my 13th video in my Next Generation Church Evangelism Strategy series, NGCES. It is accompanied by a free copy of the transcript of my upcoming third book related to church evangelism for the times in which we're living. If you want a copy, use the email address provided in the description below. Hello, I am Michael Saxon once again, your policy Christian. Perhaps the only Christian dealing with policy in any concrete terms with a particular strategy in relation to that that I know of on the internet. Today I'm going to talk about elder accountability, and I'm doing so because in my experience the problems that one will face if one wants to see the church far more active out in society, stepping back into the public square with a strategy like my NGCES strategy, you will find that you will run into problems with elders who don't want a bar of it because they are wedded to the status quo and they're wedded to safety and security in the environs of a church. So the heading of the book I'm about to get published, hopefully, is entitled Elder Accountability for Vision, Strategy, and Christian Character. And the text that the whole thing revolves around is 1 Timothy 5:17 to 19 and James 4:17. And I want to say here that this is about the elder accountability issue from a scriptural perspective, giving scriptural validity to bringing a charge against an elder. And so we'll get into that in relation, and of course it's in relation specifically to the issues that I'm raising on this platform, the Policy Christian. As you'll know if you've watched other videos, for the last 40 years the Western Church has been in a wilderness of its own making. It failed to respond to the meteoric rise of Satan's two vehemently anti-Christian giants, which are fascist liberalism and feudal corporatism, and evil was therefore left to flourish. The church's core mission is the two great commands and their prerequisite doctrines, the doctrines of evil, the doctrine of works, and the doctrine of rewards, and they've all been neglected. Church elders have not taught God's whole counsel in this regard. The church therefore lost its boldness and missional purpose. Elders must now accept they have a responsibility, they have accountability to bring the church back to its primary purpose. Now, the four-stage Next Generation Church Evangelism Strategy, NGCES, takes local churches back to the public square using 12 reforms and 5 core Christian worldview principles, the 5 principles or the 5 values: to love our neighbor and multiply opportunities for evangelism. That's the two great commands in a nutshell. So this is an appeal, therefore, for elders to restore the Western Church's sense of mission with the right vision, the right teaching, the right vision, and the right strategy. And they're all included, wrapped up in the book. Now, the mandate for bringing a charge against an elder, an accountability charge, is to be found in 1 Timothy 5:19 to 21. I'll just read it quickly for you. Do not receive an accusation against an elder. In other words, you can receive an accusation against an elder. It's legitimate to bring an accusation against an elder, providing there are 2 or 3 witnesses. Those who are sinning, there's got to be a sin involved, rebuke in the presence of all. So it's got to be open to the church, that the rest also may fear. I charge you in the sight of God and Christ, Jesus, and the elect angels, to keep these instructions without partiality and do nothing out of favoritism. So these, therefore, if we are to take the verses I've just quoted and extrapolate them out into a process view of it, is that a charge of sin or misconduct, and it doesn't have to be a moral sin, and it's not in this case, can be brought against an elder or elders by those concerned, the elders, are failing in the ways identified in the charge. And it must, of course, as I've said before, involve a verifiable sin. The charge cannot be laid by one person. There must be two or three must be involved. That goes back to Leviticus, which said if you bring a charge against someone, you need to have a witness. The matter is then adjudicated or mediated, and if the charge is proven, the elder or elders is to be corrected and redirected by the whole body of believers. This is not about recrimination, it is about correction and accountability. It follows that the elder will then take all necessary remedial action, and given that a charge proven is to be taken before the whole body of believers, it would appear sensible to have the matter heard as well before that same body of believers. Partiality and favoritism must not play a part in adjudicating a charge, and that can be quite important, obviously, in the way things are done. And the process is to be restorative. You can refer to Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 5 and 2 Corinthians 2 in that regard. It's not to be punitive unless a person refuses to acknowledge wrongdoing, change behavior, or accept accountability. So what are we dealing with in terms of a sin here? And the sin comes from James 4:17, which says, "Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin." This is the famous verse which addresses the issue of the sin of omission. The sin of omission. And it is the sin identified in the charge in the book. It is, in other words, it's linked to 1 Timothy 5. And according to the exegesis of James 4:17, this particular sin, the sin of omission, is manifest in passive inaction or the neglect of duty contrary to God's commands, or failing to act. The Greek is excuse my pronunciation, poeo, when the good to be done is or should be known. And of course, we have the concept in the Bible that ignorance is no excuse. For elders, this manifests when their teaching fails in its obedience to the whole counsel of God. Go to Acts 20:27, 2 Timothy 3:16. When the doctrines and commands calling for direct engagement with the world, which is the two great commands, are either ignored, given scant attention, or contained within a very limited context, like friendship evangelism, for example, there has been a neglect of duty contained or covered in James 4:17. Now, there are three co-requisite doctrines that are also largely ignored, and that they are, as I've said before, the doctrines of evil, works, and rewards. I have another video on this as well. Without a focus on these doctrines, the two great commands inevitably will fade into the background and nigh on disappear, as they have in many churches, especially in a highly pietistic church environment, which we have in many evangelical churches in the Western world. So the core issue is one of relevance in teaching to our times, which is one of the great precepts in the Bible. And you'll see this if you order the manuscript and look into what I'm talking about here. Elders caught up in the sin of omission leave themselves in their churches vulnerable to lost potential, to ineffectiveness, to immaturity, see Hebrews 5:14, and misplaced self-justification. And we've been seeing all of this in spades over the last 40 years of our wilderness experience. The intent behind Philippians 1:9-11 cannot be fulfilled. James 1:22 is forgotten, and the instruction given by Jesus in Matthew 16 is ignored. And I'll just now go through those verses quickly. In James 1:22, first of all, which is to do with works, it says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Pietism puts a heavy emphasis on listening and praising God for what he has done for us, but very little on the works we should be doing for God. Philippians 1:9-11 focuses on rewards. And it says, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. And when you are in this vein, you're obviously going to receive your full reward from Jesus Christ. And when you are not, especially when you fail to respond to the times in which we're living in relation to the two great commands, those rewards are going to diminish significantly. Matthew 16:24-25, again about works. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." In other words, take up and do the things that Jesus would have us do. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me, does the works that they are capable of doing for Jesus, will find it. James 14 is a command on believers to remain obedient to the full spectrum of God's word, in effect. Jesus explicitly said he was devoted to doing exactly what his Father told him to do. In like manner, the church should be equally committed, by Paul's example, to teaching his whole counsel. Failing to do so has any church failing in its watchman's role, coming from the references in Ezekiel, relative to loving our neighbour and making disciples. And it ends up not being the salt and light it should be, and may be held accountable for the blood of those it fails to warn. That's the watchman role from Ezekiel. If you do request the manuscript, you will note that from the title and the contents that the actual charge under 1 Timothy 5 and James 4 is tied into the vision and strategy for a church that addresses the issues raised in the charge. It's the same strategy I cover on this channel, the Next Generation Church Evangelism Strategy. There's the book for it there, available from Amazon. Now, the book also goes into the issue of objections. If you're going to put this charge, and there is a charge type format you can use at the back end of the book in an appendix, but if you're going to put this charge to an elder with a witness then, or witnesses, you're going to end up facing objections, maybe, probably, in my experience. And therefore, I have a section where I deal with a whole range of objections that may or can be or are likely to be raised by elders, and how you can effectively deal with those. I also then go on to look at what the consequences will be if we carry on as we are in churches, neglecting the Great Commission, the Great Command, and those co-requisite doctrines. And the consequences are dire for both the church, individual Christians, and for non-Christians as well, and of course our civilization, our culture. Then there's another section in the book that deals with Christian character. The Next Generation Church Evangelism Strategy is a much more muscular approach to Christianity, more masculine, whereas the church for the last 40 years has majored on a much more feminized approach to Christianity. And that's not a criticism of women. It's simply saying that we've overemphasized the feminine side of God and not as masculine character. So there you have it. An introduction to what you can do biblically to bring elders up short and require them to take a good hard look at what they are doing. The core issues, as I've said earlier, is the issue of relevance to our times, which I cover in the section on meeting objections as well, by the way. Of course, an elder or pastor may refuse to do anything in relation to this, and if they do that, they'll be acting extra biblically, and that's a serious matter, and we will perhaps deal with that again in the future. So that's it until next time. I'm Michael Saxon, your policy Christian. Feel free to subscribe to my Substack, Last Post Bugle, which takes a more non-Christian view of the same material. And to also, it is advanced but somewhat further down the policy path than I've done so far here, and I hope to catch up on that somewhat next video. See you soon. Bye.